All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Drought in the Midwest webinar. My name is Molly Wolison, and I coordinate the Midwest Drought Early Warning System at NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, and I'm located in Champaign, Illinois. I'm with the Cooperative Institute for Research and Environmental Sciences at the University of Colorado in Boulder. This webinar is part of a series of bi-monthly drought webinars designed to provide stakeholders and other interested parties in the Midwest with timely and relevant drought information and resources. First, some housekeeping items. On this webinar, all attendees are muted. If you have questions during the webinar, please ask them at any time using the Q&A feature on WebEx. We will have time throughout the webinar for Q&A with our speakers. Finally, the webinar is being recorded, and the webinar recording will be available on the NIDIS YouTube channel and linked from the webinars page at drought.gov/webinars. We will send an email when the webinar recording has been posted. Today's webinar will include 3 presentations. First, we'll hear about current drought conditions and impacts across the Midwest from Aaron Wilson, who is the Ohio State climatologist at The Ohio State University. Next, Darrin Hansing is the service climatologist at the National Weather Service office in Central Illinois, and he will give us an overview of the drought outlook information. Finally, today's final presentation will be given by Melissa Woodhelm, who is the Associate Director of the Midwestern Regional Climate Center at Purdue University. She will give an overview of the MRCC's online climate data system, cli-MATE. I wanted to take a quick moment to highlight the partners that help make this webinar series possible. The partners across the region are instrumental in the development of these webinars, and the products and services they provide are pivotal in staying updated on conditions throughout the region. Before we begin presentations, a brief background about NIDIS. NIDIS was created by Congress in 2006 with a mandate to help the nation prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the impacts of drought. NIDIS does this through a series of activities, including the coordination of regional drought early warning systems, or DEWs, shown on the map here, and through support to improve drought predictions and forecasting, effective drought planning and preparedness, and assessing the impacts of drought. All of NIDIS's work is done in collaboration with a wide range of partners at all levels. In addition, NIDIS hosts the US Drought portal available at drought.gov. The Drought portal provides up-to-date drought conditions across a variety of scales, interactive and customizable maps, historical drought information, and much, much more. We encourage you to visit drought.gov for any drought information that you may need. Next, if you came across this webinar in any other way besides a direct email to you and you want to receive the recording and other information from the Midwest DEWs, please follow the link in the chat to sign up. You also might be interested in our bi-weekly Dry Times newsletter and our Tribal Engagement newsletter. You can also stay informed on news and events from the homepage of drought.gov. This is where you can find access to our latest news stories, upcoming and past webinars, sign up for email lists, and access the regional drought status updates and the National Weather Service drought information statements. Understanding on-the-ground drought impacts is important for accurate drought monitoring and response. One way to report your drought impacts is through the Condition Monitoring Observer Reports, or CMOR system, hosted by the National Drought Mitigation Center. Another way to report is for CoCoRa's observers, and you have the option to submit a condition monitoring report. Both of these are great user-friendly systems to submit the impacts that you are experiencing from too much or too little water. Becoming a regular reporter makes this information more accessible to those who assess drought in your state, and links to learn more are in the chat box. Finally, I wanted to mention 2 opportunities to provide public comment on NOAA products and services. NIDIS and the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center partnered to implement a redesign of the CPC's drought outlook maps. The National Weather Service is soliciting public comments through July 10th on 2 areas. First, a redesign of the drought outlook display to improve stakeholder usability, understanding, and interpretation. and second, the addition of a new category on the outlooks. The second public comment opportunity is for the National Weather Service, and they are seeking public and stakeholder input through June 8th on the modernization of the Cooperative Observer Program, or COOP. COOP has provided critical data via a volunteer network since 1890. The links to provide your comments on either of these opportunities will be in the chat box. All right, and without further ado, I will now pass it off to Aaron Wilson for the first presentation. And just a reminder, please add any questions you have for our speakers in the questions box, which you can find through the Slido app, and we will get to those after Aaron and Darrin present. Aaron?
Hi, Molly. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Great, thanks. And welcome, everybody. It's a great afternoon to be here to talk a little bit about drought in the Midwest and update those conditions. As Molly mentioned, I'm the state climatologist here in Ohio, and I also work for the Department of Extension at The Ohio State University. And so, you know, it's sort of as typical across the Midwest. It covers quite a few states and a lot of different conditions across our area. And this has been quite the ride here this spring. And so that's what we're going to do today, is kind of look at both the wet, dry side and wet side and everything in between, as we've sort of bounced it back and forth in a lot of locations. But certainly we've got some drought concerns out there that we'll focus on today. So next slide. So we'll start just looking at temperature departures here from normal, looking at the 30-year window of 1991 to 2020. First on the left, you can see our March through May temperature anomalies or differences, those departures from normal. You got to go way up north, northern Minnesota, to get cool anomalies for spring. The rest of us, as you can see, from mid-Minnesota, northern Wisconsin southward, have those orange or red colors or warmer, temperatures compared to normal over the 3-month period. And, specifically, if we look at like the month of March, for instance, a lot of the states in our region were in the top 10 warmest Marches on record, including Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. April was even warmer for a lot of us here in the East. Warmest April on record, going back to 1895, for places like Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri as well. And then really out here, Ohio and Kentucky had their warmest start to spring in terms of April, or March and April as well. And next week, NOAA will drop the May statistics in terms of rankings that we'll be able to find at Climate at a Glance as well. Extending back to the first of the year, out east in our eastern states like Ohio, Michigan, and parts of Indiana, it was a rather cool winter. But with that warm spring, we've sort of erased those anomalies. But the departures from normal for the year so far, January through May, much warmer as you head farther west, particularly in states of Iowa and Missouri, where those temperature departures for the year now on that 3 to 5 degree range. So quite the warm temperatures, certainly since the beginning of the year for most of the Midwest and all of the Midwest, really, except the far northern, upper Midwest there and far northern Minnesota in terms of our March through May period or climatological spring. Next slide. As far as precipitation, with that, we see a lot of bright colors here, but this is, in terms of the amount of accumulated precipitation on the left-hand side, and we're just looking at spring totals and departures, so March through May. So a lot of those blues, again, are getting in that 10 to 20 or 20 plus inches of rainfall, and particularly the heaviest amount of rain falling in central Missouri. Also in southern Indiana, extending up into parts of the Ohio Valley as well, and also some heavier stuff in the upper counties there of lower Michigan as well. So this is a little bit, again, deceiving, because we've seen some pretty rapid oscillations, as you'll see in a moment, in terms of precipitation departures. But the one good thing is a lot of these areas across Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois initially had some drought conditions lingering since last year, and we have seen improvements over some areas of the Midwest when it comes to the overall picture. A little bit different story when we just look at May, which we will in a second. So on the right-hand side, you can see the departures for spring. Again, highlighting those very wet conditions of parts of Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, stretching back through central Illinois and into sort of central or west central Missouri. A lot of other areas, very dry conditions across Minnesota and northern Iowa, as well as from sort of southeastern Missouri across southern Illinois, into Kentucky, where those departures in many of those counties in that 50 to 75% range. And again, this is for the 3-month period, March through May. Much wetter conditions for many folks in, say, April compared to May. And we'll look at some of those rapid oscillations here just in a second. Next slide. So as I said, in just a second, obviously the next slide, really just honing in on the May precipitation departures. So the heaviest, again, in those areas that I already mentioned. But for May, even areas that were very wet, parts of southern Wisconsin, for instance, I want to point that area out. Very wet, record territory in terms of April, in terms of the wettest April on record in Michigan and Wisconsin as well. Turned very dry, as we'll see in a moment, on some of the individual station records here, but very dry conditions across southern Wisconsin. That extends down into northern Illinois. And I've highlighted this area that has with the Climate Prediction Center sort of increased in this flash drought risk area. So we'll kind of talk about that, I think, in the outlooks coming up. But just to kind of hone in on the area, May looking very different for many of these states compared to earlier in the spring season. So again, some of that heavier precipitation is, in the last 30 days. The last 30 days have really been a lot drier and kind of hiding some of those anomalies. Next slide. So again, these rapid oscillations in places like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where they only picked up 0.36 inches of rain. That's a 155-year record here. This was a site, for instance, just like the state was its wettest April on record. This was the wettest April on record for Milwaukee, followed by its driest May on record here in a 155-year record. So that's quite the switch and quite the oscillation. On the flip side of that, down here in my area in Dayton, Ohio, for instance, we had somewhat of a dry April, about 50 to about 75% of normal in April, but we had 10.31 inches of rain during the month of May. This is 133-year record here, 4th wettest month all time. So not just the wettest May on record, but the 4th wettest month of all time on this side of things. And so, quite the different conditions over a very somewhat tight gradient here from Southwest Ohio to Southeast Wisconsin. And that, of course, extends down, those dry conditions extending down into northern Illinois, central Illinois, over into parts of Missouri and up into Minnesota and the rest of Wisconsin and Michigan as well. So very dry conditions and very rapid oscillations. Next slide. So stepping back a little bit, looking a little bit broader at our overall conditions here, sort of long-term precipitation departure. So while we were wet in a lot of areas for March and April with dry conditions in May, we have been building some deficits over our longer-term period. You can see the 6-month, the 9-month, and the 12-month maps here for accumulative precipitation percent of normals. So even extending back 6 months here and kind of honing in on areas of southeastern Missouri, southern Illinois, southwest Indiana, and throughout Kentucky. These are some longer term deficits in precipitation that we've seen, while areas farther north have benefited from that spring precipitation, extending from central Missouri to Ohio and then into Michigan as well. But if you even go back to, again, 9-month period, that area from Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, these are, precipitation deficits here, percents of normal in the 50 to 75% range. So there's some increased risk there, obviously, with the combination of the long-term dry conditions, drier conditions, along with those rapid drying conditions that we've seen here in the month of May as well. Next slide. So what about some of our impacts on hydrology and soils and other things that we look at here? So this is the one-day average stream flow conditions valid on the 3rd of June. So again, as you would expect, some of the areas that have been very dry, southeastern Wisconsin into parts of Illinois and even into northwest Indiana, these are stream flows that are much below historical medians here in these areas. Some of the wetter areas, again, extending from previous drought conditions in Ohio across Indiana, where conditions have improved here this spring. And even more recently, some rainfall falling across parts of Missouri through Kentucky, a lot of northern and central Kentucky that were very dry during the month of April, really extending, slowing the drying trends in that portion of our Midwestern states. I'd also like to point out the low stream flows across northern Wisconsin into northern Minnesota. So really the headwaters of the Mississippi here that have been impacted, and we'll see that in our impacts here in just a second. As far as that water balance coming down the rivers here, looking at the Ohio and the Missouri River, certainly for areas south of here that are interested in that quantity, we can see they're about where they typically are for this time of the year. Some oscillations there in that amount. Of course, the dry conditions early on had some decreases in the Ohio Valley as we went through the month of May, but that recent rain, very heavy historical rain here in parts of central and southern Ohio, has brought those levels back up. And so this is the Ohio River at Cairo. And then also looking at the Missouri River at Herman here, so about where we typically are in terms of flows in those areas. So, from a larger perspective of the amount of stream flow or river flow coming out of the Ohio and Missouri, things look okay where we stand right now. Next slide. One of the things that's driving some of the concern or increased risk of some flash out conditions, obviously very warmer conditions as we got into the last week of May. And so we're looking at potential evapotranspiration here across the region. This is a product provided, I got this from our Midwestern Regional Climate Center partners. But you can see the potential evaporation during that 7-day or week, that last week of May, were quite high across eastern Iowa, parts of Illinois, and extending again up into Minnesota and Wisconsin as well. And then just looking at that product, the precipitation minus that potential evapotranspiration. And so these are areas that are, getting, deficits in the overall water balance is the way we can look at that. And really delineate some of those wetter areas, southern Missouri, now into a little bit parts of Kentucky, and then certainly central and southern Ohio, extending back into southeast Indiana as well. So pretty stark dividing line there, and we're going to see that here in just a second in terms of some vegetative health index as well. So next slide. Of course, this is driving some of our changes in our soil moisture. So we can see our NASA list product here looking at soil moisture percentiles over the top 100 centimeters. And as we mentioned, those really rapidly drying areas of parts of Iowa, southern Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana really sticking out here from that perspective. And another product with the crop CASMA product, subsoil temperature down to a meter. Those soil moisture anomalies are pretty consistent in that area on the dry side. So it's just indicating those rapidly drying conditions. Same for southeastern Missouri into southern Illinois. So there is that wetter band from Missouri up into Ohio, but north and south of there, soil moisture is really standing out. And then again, over other parts of Iowa, extending up into Minnesota now with those decreasing soil moisture percentiles in those areas. Next slide. So it's having an impact not just on the soil moisture, but overall the vegetative health. And this is a product-based, satellite-based product looking at radiances here. And the reds are really, and pinks are really showing sort of a poor score on vegetative health index, where you've got your greens and blues. This would be indicating more lush, not necessarily, not moisture-starved vegetation in these areas. Of course, many of us have fully leafed out. We still have some of that taking place farther north, but you can really see that line really from Joplin, Missouri, up through about Toledo, Ohio, or northern Indiana even, of a pretty stark difference between healthy vegetation indicated by the radiances here versus vegetation that doesn't look so great. So even some ecological impacts here when we deal with vegetative health across parts of Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota. So this was kind of a clear indication of some of the impacts that we're already starting to feel here in early June. Next slide. So of course, all of this is coming together with the latest U.S. Drought Monitor report that was released this morning. We're looking at conditions across much of the Midwest. Again, the D1, D2, more of the D1, D2, and even D3 areas extending from southern Missouri, southern Illinois, into the bulk of central and southern Kentucky. So those are where the conditions are a little bit more severe there across our region. When we go farther north, again, parts of Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota, these are areas that are seeing sort of the more recent in really quick changing conditions. I should say parts of northern Minnesota, those are a little bit more longer term, just like in southeastern Missouri as well. But that area of northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin is really starting to show up now based on the conditions that we've seen over the last 30 days. And you can see the 4-week change in the U.S. Drought Monitor map here on the right-hand side. Again, some improvements, recent improvements across Kentucky, Missouri, but really those decrease or degradations there in parts of Illinois and southern Wisconsin. So next slide. And this brings us to our impacts overall. Again, some significant improvement in the drought extend across the Midwest this spring. Droughts really shifted over the spring into south into Kentucky, southern Illinois, as we mentioned, but much more recent drying trends across Ohio, northern Illinois, Minnesota, and some concerns for flash drought in those areas. Next slide. We've seen, based on the Seymour reports and the Coco-Ross conditioning reports and others, in Illinois, rapid decline in soil moisture. So, a lot of supplemental hay feeding and livestock and plant stress that's already being indicated. A lot of flash drought or drought, short-term dryness issues emerging in Iowa. But even in southeastern Missouri, again, pretty intense drought over the last month, but the impacts have been fairly minimal still at this point. But we've got some longer-term impacts there as well. And my final slide. As far as other states, and this is another picture of this, the Warren County, Kentucky bridge here that I know Molly used another picture from our Seymour reports, but water supply concerns have been an issue in Kentucky and along with ag impacts in terms of low farm ponds and pasture growth. Again, some recent rainfall has helped in those areas. And across Minnesota, really some delayed leaf out as well and wildlife impacts. So a variety of conditions here. Other states have been a bit wetter, and we're just watching conditions right now in parts of Ohio, eastern Indiana as well, and then parts of Michigan to see how the season unfolds. So that's the report I have, and I'll throw it back over to Molly. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron. That was a great overview, and I even just a few weeks ago thought this would be a very different webinar report. So it's kind of crazy how quickly things can change in some locations. So thank you again. All right, we are going to turn it over to Darrin. Let me go ahead and advance the slides. So Darrin, I will let you take it away.
Great, thanks, Molly. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Darrin Hansing, and I'm the service hydrologist with the Weather Service office in Lincoln, Illinois. Happy to talk to you today about the latest drought outlook information. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, and we'll take a look at the 7-day forecast precipitation. And this graphic is generated by the Weather Prediction Center and spans from June 4th through the 11th. Now what we've got is blocking high pressure over the eastern U.S. and a nearly stationary frontal boundary that's stretching across the northern plains and into the upper Midwest. Now this is going to serve as a primary focus for convective development over the next several days. Along with that, we do have a corridor of strong low-level moisture from the Gulf that's being transported northward. So that's going to interact with that stalled frontal zone and some passing mid-level disturbances and bring us a favorable setup for repeated rounds of showers and thunderstorms. And some of those could potentially bring heavy rain and possible flash flooding to areas from the plains into the upper Midwest. Now, the highest rainfall amounts, as you can see there, spanning largely from eastern Nebraska and Kansas and into western Missouri, and especially as we look across portions of Iowa. Now, moving on to the next slide. Go ahead and take a look here. Heading into this weekend and early next week, we're expecting that southerly flow to bring above normal temperatures, and again, those humid conditions with that Gulf moisture across the region. Daytime highs are expected to push into the upper 80s to low 90s, so it's going to be warm and pretty humid. Heat indices are going to be pushing into the mid 90s. Now, with that said, as we look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, and this is generated by the Climate Prediction Center, we can see warmer than normal conditions are expected to continue in the June 9th to the 13th timeframe. And we do have pretty high confidence, especially as we look across the upper Mississippi Valley and western Great Lakes, where we see greater than 70% likelihood. And moving on to the next slide, expectations are that the active weather in the near term is going to give way to more uncertainty further into next week. And this low confidence is reflected in the precipitation outlook for the 9th through the 13th. As we can see across the Midwest, we're leaning towards above normal precipitation in the western half of the region, transitioning to near normal to below normal in the eastern half. Next slide. Pushing a little further out into time, June 11th through the 17th, again, those warmer than normal conditions are expected to continue. Confidence is still pretty high, especially across the Great Lakes and in the Ohio Valley, greater than 50% likelihood for this time frame. Next slide. Taking a look at the 8 to 14 day precipitation outlook, we're leaning towards above normal precipitation across the Midwest. Confidence isn't particularly high as we're not seeing any real strong signals for precipitation. We'll likely see some generally weaker systems move across the region, but there's a lot of uncertainty as to how that's going to set up, which is largely why we see this broad swath of these low confidence probabilities. Next slide. Okay, now taking a look at the 8 to 14 day hazards outlook, our first concern as we look there at the graphic on the left, increased potential for extreme heat across portions of the central US. Now, this is associated with mid-level high pressure that's forecast over southern Canada. So with this, there's a slight risk, 20 to 40% likelihood for extreme heat conditions across portions of the Great Plains, Mississippi Valley, and Great Lakes mid to late next week. So with this, we're looking at high temperatures potentially pushing into the mid-90s. It's going to be warm and soupy with heat indices possibly reaching triple digits. Okay, second concern on the slide, again, as Aaron was discussing, potential for rapid onset drought. As Aaron showed, over the past several weeks, rainfall has been pretty limited over portions of the region. We saw that expansion of abnormally dry conditions and new pockets of moderate drought with the latest drought monitor issuance this week. Although we're looking at a more active near-term weather pattern, the dry conditions along with the above normal temperatures really drove the decision by the Climate Prediction Center for the continuation of the rapid onset drought risk. Now moving on to the next slide, let's go ahead and take a look at the week 3 to 4 outlooks. And this is largely covering the back half of the month. We're looking at some weakness in the ridging signal over the upper Midwest and extending down into the Western Gulf. As we look at temperatures, the upper left graphic, we see kind of a mixed bag with these low confidence probabilities ranging from below normal in far southwestern portions of the region to above normal across northeastern sections. So not a whole lot to hang your hat on as far as strong probabilities. Moving on to precipitation, the lower left graphic, we still have some lower confidence probabilities. We're looking at equal chances across the northern half of the region, so not seeing any real strong signals to tilt the probabilities in any direction. However, we do see increasing likelihood, 40 to 50% for above normal precipitation in the south, and this is stretching from Missouri to Ohio and down through Kentucky. Now, for those interested, the Climate Prediction Center will be updating the week 3 to 4 outlook tomorrow afternoon. So going on to the next slide, we'll take a look at the seasonal outlooks, and this is going to be spanning June, July, and August. And as we look at the temperature outlook, we really don't see any dominant trends for most of the Midwest region. We've got equal chances for below, near, or above normal temperatures throughout this time period. And we largely see a continuation of that in the precipitation outlook, again with equal chances across much of the Midwest region. However, we are leaning towards below normal precipitation from the eastern plains into the upper Mississippi Valley, though confidence is still low in that. Now taking a look at the seasonal drought outlook, again, this is for June, July, and August. We're expecting increased drought development, especially across northwestern portions of the region. We're seeing some of the beginnings of that with the latest drought monitor issuance, as Aaron was talking about. Drought conditions are projected to improve, thankfully, or even come to an end in areas stretching from southern Missouri eastward into Kentucky. Some of the factors that were feeding into the development of this drought outlook include, as was mentioned, warmer than normal start to summer across the region, as well as potential for below normal summer precipitation across the northeastern plains and into the upper Mississippi Valley that we saw on the last slide. So moving on to the next slide here. I know it's been in the news quite a bit lately, expectations for El Nino to develop. So I did want to go ahead and touch on that as far as what we are expecting with El Nino. So moving on to the next slide. We do have an El Nino watch in effect. We are expecting El Nino to likely emerge very soon and last through the winter months. For the winter months, December through February, looking at a 96% chance, so very high likelihood. Impacts from El Nino typically will reach their peak intensity late fall through the winter months. Now we are looking at a combined 2 and 3 chance of a strong or very strong El Nino this year. But it's important to note that stronger events, they don't always mean bigger impacts. It just makes certain outcomes more likely. But again, it's not guaranteed. And as we look at the graphic in the lower right, as you can see, a typical El Nino pattern across our region, typically warmer and drier conditions, although we can get pretty significant variability from event to event. And that's really kind of driven home as we look at the next slide here. We're going to take a look at some strong El Nino events and look at the temperature departure for these events throughout time. And as you can see with the blue shades depicting colder than average and red are warmer than average, you can see quite a bit of variability with some of these past strong El Nino events. And in the far right portion of the graphic, you do see a composite there, which overall does lend itself towards above normal temperatures across the plains and into the western Great Lakes. But as you can see there, quite a bit of variability between these events. And this really continues on as we look at the precipitation graphic on the next slide. Again, that continued variability with the browns depicting drier than average precipitation and green depicting wetter. Again, that variability continues. And as you look at the composite, it's largely a wash across much of the region and lending itself towards drier conditions as we head into Michigan, Indiana, and Kentucky. So as we move on to the last slide, kind of rounding things out with the summary here. Again, in the near term, a more active weather pattern is expected. We do have that heavy rain potential across western portions of the region with drier conditions in the southeast. Temperatures are going to be on the rise. Again, it's going to be hot and soupy with that Gulf moisture pumping up into the region. But as far as drought goes, we are expecting drought to develop across Minnesota, southern Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, northern Illinois, and northwest Indiana. And again, we've seen the beginnings of that with the latest drought monitor issuance. Drought improvement is expected from southern Missouri into Kentucky. Again, good news there. And as far as El Nino goes, again, it's likely to emerge soon, lasting through the winter months. Again, pretty good likelihood for a strong or very strong event this go around. And with that, I'll send it back over to you, Molly.
All right, thank you. Great presentation, and sorry for that hiccup in the middle there. And thank you, Kelsey, for taking over. I just lost internet for a second. Before we move on to Melissa's presentation, we're just going to pause and answer a few questions that have come in for Aaron and Darrin. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll either get to them now or after Melissa's presentation. The first one is about the mention of the low headwaters on the Mississippi River. And the question is, what do you all think the low headwaters on the Mississippi River could mean later in the season for potential downstream navigation? So Aaron, I don't know if you would like to answer that.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. I think that's a great question. I think obviously the longer dry conditions are, continue across the headwaters in Minnesota and Wisconsin and everywhere, that obviously can be problematic. We're also looking at the Ohio. So, the recent rain from the Ohio has probably, really kept the lower leg of the Mississippi a little bit higher than it would be if both basins, for instance, like we saw in 2024, were really low. So that's something to keep in mind. I think some of the forecasts that do have those flows along the Mississippi, dropping here over the next couple of weeks. If you look at some of the forecasts that are provided from the weather from the National Water Center. So, it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. And, obviously with the forecast that Darrin showed over parts of Iowa and some of those areas, obviously that will help slow the drying trend in the area. But if that continues here throughout the upcoming summer season, then we'll become more concerned, I think, with some of that downstream navigation potential along the Mississippi.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our other question, and I might just try to quickly answer this one, is isn't rapid onset drought kind of an oxymoron? And they were just kind of curious about that term. And so, yes, we have used the terminology rapid onset drought, also known as flash drought. And it is definitely it's a different terminology, and it really, even though drought is a much more slowly evolving weather event, especially compared to hurricanes, thunderstorms, there is a way for drought to develop rapidly, which is over the course of a few weeks. And so, yes, it is a little bit different than other hazards, but that is kind of the idea behind it, is that it's slow, or it's quicker than it normally is over the, it takes a few weeks to develop. So I don't know, Aaron or Darrin, if you have any comments on that, but.
Yeah, I think just think about, it's not just a lack of precip, but often it's accompanied by abnormally high temperatures, so getting temperatures in the low to mid 90s in the forecast. If you got strong winds, and increased solar radiation, those are all things that can really drive or accelerate evapotranspiration. And so when those things come together, you can get these very, these flash drought conditions that can develop drought over just a few weeks instead of some more of the long-term kind of look at things. So yeah, it's a really rapid moisture loss, and it can affect crops, ecosystems, and even water resources pretty bad if we don't detect that early. So that's part of detecting flash drought conditions, or the risk of those conditions, to help manage and make those decisions necessary, or at least be mindful of those conditions are rapidly changing.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, we will move along to Melissa's presentation. Melissa, if you would like to share your screen to go through yours.
All right. Are you seeing my screen and hearing me?
Yep. Everything looks and sounds good. Take it away.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. My name is Melissa Widhelm, and I am the Associate Director and Regional Climatologist with the Midwestern Regional Climate Center, located at Purdue University. So the Midwestern Regional Climate Center, you'll hear me call it MRCC. We are one of 6 regional groups that partner with NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information, or NCEI, to deliver high quality climate data, tools, interactive maps, customized services, you name it. In short, we build tools to help you make decisions. And whether you're a casual user or a sophisticated user, or if you need generally informative products or decision-specific products, or you want past, current, or future climate data, we like to think we have something for everyone. But today, we're going to focus in on just one specific product that we call cli-MATE. cli-MATE is our self-service portal for accessing climate data and generating customized statistics and tables and charts and maps. We've had this tool for well over a decade, but within the last several months, we started rolling out some revamps of the system, both on the front end and the back end. So I appreciate Molly giving me the opportunity to give everybody just a high-level look at what our system has to offer, and then specifically demonstrate just a few of our products that are particularly helpful for drought monitoring and assessment. So I highly encourage you, as I go through this, for you to follow along on your own computer. cli-MATE does not require a login. If you are a legacy cli-MATE user, you'll know that we used to make you log in. That's no longer a thing. So you can either follow the link shown here on the screen and just jump right in, and perhaps you can, Molly, put that in the chat as well. Or if you go to our homepage, which is listed there on the bottom of this slide, mrcc.purdue.edu, you can click on the cli-MATE card right on the middle of the screen, or you can go to the top navigation and find cli-MATE in the Data tab. So once you go to those locations, you are now going to find yourself on the landing page, the home page of cli-MATE. So basically, all of the pages that you go to, you will find this top navigation. This is sort of your anchor point to navigate throughout the tool. From the home page, you will also see these launch buttons. These two different places get you to the same thing, and we'll jump into that in a moment. So if you're just ready to get your hands dirty, get right in there, click the launch button, get started. If you're wanting to go through a little bit more methodically and you scroll down the page, you'll see this product exploration tool, which actually lists out all of the individual tools within the different topic sections. And so I highlighted here in red, you can toggle across the different topic types and the bottom selection updates. So it's a little bit more interactive. If you're more of a static document, I want to print out to stick on my wall, you can find up here in the top right some 2-page PDFs that are ready for printing and provide the same information that I'm showing here on the screen. Now, if we scroll back up to the top of that landing page, just to orient you a little bit, the daily data and hourly data topics, those you can think of as station level. So either an individual data point that I'm going to collect information about, or maybe a series of points from an area. The state and divisional data products launch will take you into an aggregated set of data. So say I want to know something about the state of Indiana as a whole, or a specific climate division within Indiana, this would be the section of the site for you. And if you really want to make maps, which I know a lot of folks do, and thank you, Erin, for using so many of our maps, we'll go through that here in a little bit, the gridded and interpolated maps button would be for you. Right now, you see 2 options, launch new, launch legacy. I would highly recommend you start with the new. We are no longer accepting registrations on the legacy site, so unless you already have a login, you won't be able to get in there anyway, and the new system just works much faster. All right, let's get in there. So I'm going to go ahead and just launch our daily data product. And when you do that, you'll find yourself on a page like this. You are defaulted to the input page for the daily data between 2 dates product. The layout for all of the input pages are effectively the same. Again, at the top, you'll find that navigation anchor. You can see daily is highlighted, and then a second row of sub-navigation buttons comes into play. It does that for all of the different tabs, and when you're in the tool, you can test that out yourselves. Remember, I said these are station level, point level data, so we do have a station selector. For this example, I found myself in Lexington, Kentucky, even though that's not where I'm located, but that's what we're going to look at for this little demonstration. And if you didn't want the default tool, which is the daily climate between 2 dates, good news, you just hit the little drop down button on the product selector and you can find up to 19 different daily station tools that are available. So these tools range from very basic data listers to very powerful sort and aggregator tools. Now for demonstration purposes, let's go ahead and start with a simple but common question that often comes up. How much am I ahead or behind on precipitation for this time of year for my location? So again, for Lexington, Kentucky. If you click that selector, you'll see this list that pops up. You can see that the different tools have subheaders or headers that they're subcategorized under. So daily, monthly, annual, and this indicates how the data will be processed and displayed. Generally speaking, there are a number of ways that you can answer your question within cli-MATE, but for this particular question, how much am I ahead or behind for Lexington, Kentucky, we're going to recommend the single variable data tool. So if I click on that tool, first we're going to land on that input page. You know you're in the right spot because that title, see where that red arrow is, that title has updated. So this tool, you can select your date range. So remember, our question was for the whole year. So I'm going to default my date range to look at just this year. I can select my variable, which I said was precipitation. And then very importantly, I want to adjust this other information. These are by default turned off, but for this question, I'm going to turn on the departures and the departure accumulation because that's a quick and easy way for getting year-to-date precipitation statistics. I click Get Results. It lands us on the product output page. Data are defaulted to a tabular format. You can hit the little buttons to sort. You can toggle between the table and a graph. You can download the data with this little gold button here on the right. And then once you have it downloaded, you can do further analysis on your own machine. So here I've sorted the table. So I have the most recent observations at the top. I would just scroll down if I want to see the rest of the year's data. And what I really like about this tool was that by selecting that departure accumulation in that far right-hand column, now we get this day-to-day tally that tells us how far or behind, how far or ahead are we on precipitation for this year. So I highlighted here the last day of May. And so what this tells me is that for Lexington, Kentucky, January 1st to May 31st, so those first 5 months of the year, we're about 6.91 inches behind where we would typically be. All right, so my next logical question then is, well, how does this level of dryness compare to past Januaries to Mays? Well, to do that, I'm going to need another tool, and we're going to use the back button. Just a word of caution, use that red back button and not your browser's arrows. The browser's arrows will pop you out of the tool and start you over, and that's very frustrating. Use the back button. So from here, I get back to my product input page. I can select a new tool from that tool selector. And now I'm going to go to the monthly and seasonal rankings tool, which is actually one of my favorite tools. So I navigate to that tool. It's going to look very similar to our other input pages. I can check that title. It says monthly and seasonal rankings, so I know I'm in the right spot. And then I can just start right in. So here we would adjust our time period. For me, I want to know for all history, right? For everything that's available for this station, I want to compare those rankings. So I select my period of record, but I want to know for a very specific range of dates, right? I want to know from January to May. So this button here, you can see the month, season, custom range. If I just wanted to know June data, I can filter out and just look at June. If I want to know the spring, the winter, I could do that. Or if I want to have that very customized experience, January to May, which isn't quite half a year, it doesn't fall in any individual season, I can do that as well. I can sort my table. I can tell it from the start. I want to know driest to wettest as opposed to wettest to driest. I'm looking to see, again, that question of how does my current dryness rank compared to all other years? Now, when I hit this button, it again gives me tabular data, but in the interest of time, I went ahead and sorted that for us. And what we found was that really it's nowhere near close to record dry. The January to May 2026 actually ranked about 24th driest out of 143 ranked years. So yes, it's dry, but it's not record dry. All right, let's do one more here. And now I want to focus on the hourly data. So before we were in that daily data tool, I want to switch over for just one other question, look at something that's a bit more abstract of a question. And so I'm going to use the hourly data threshold search to answer my question. Do we get a lot of dry heat days in June? Just, something that people often ask me, well, what do you mean by dry heat days? Well, I'm not really talking about precipitation. I want to know about that moisture in the air, right? Aaron was telling us that we have areas that have been very dry, lots of evaporation. That's what I'm trying to get at. Well, that's going to require a different set of variables. So I've got to go to the hourly tools where I can get unique variables like humidity or wind speeds and things like that. So now I'm on the threshold search tool for hourly data. Again, one of my favorite tools. You can see where you can adjust the time period. I did the full period of record, and then I just went back to last year. So not up through current year because June 2026 hasn't happened yet. You can limit your results if you're just interested in a specific time of year, or you can leave it to the full year. And then importantly, here's the really unique part. I can add thresholds. So for me, I want to know all of the instances where my dew point temperature, so a measure of that moisture in the air, was low. So I picked less than or equal to 50, but my air temperature was very high. So temperatures 80 or above. When I do that, this tool sorts through and does all that heavy lifting, in this case, looking at over 600,000 hourly observations. and it pulls out the measurements that meet my specification. So as you can see here on the screen, it defaults to showing me a chronological listing of all of these hours, but that's not what I want. Remember, I wanted to know how many days in June. So I can switch that interval to days, I can switch that output table to monthly counts, and I can sort that table by June, and now we're talking. So now what we're looking at is for all of the days in June, for all of the years going down this table that meet my criteria of being a low dew point, high temperature day. And very quickly, I can see there really aren't that many days that meet that criteria. So when I'm looking at this, I noticed, just out of my own knowledge, quite a few drought years, right? 1988, 2012. So I actually went back into my seasonal my monthly and seasonal ranking tool, and I wanted to know for Lexington, Kentucky, what were my top 10 driest months for that location. And I put little stars here in that table just to match them up. So, you know, what this is telling me is that, yeah, I get a lot of dry heat days in drought years, which isn't very surprising if you understand drought or in those patterns. But anyway, these are just some examples of how you can kind of iterate through those questions to do drought monitoring and assessment for a specific location. All right, last thing before I wrap it up, and this is the maps. Everybody loves maps, and if we look at that top navigation, I just clicked on maps. You can see there's a few different mapping tools. We're just going to look at one, which is the gridded maps, which are very similar to what Aaron was showing at the start of these presentations. Similar to the other product inputs, you can select what date range you're interested in. You could select your variable from the drop-down list. Each variable has a customizable set of calculations that you can do. You can set your region. Maybe you want the whole country, or maybe you want a specific state. Or for me, I'm with the MRCC, so I wanted that. And you can also add and remove different mapping features to generate a beautiful customized map similar to what's shown here on your screen. So here we're looking at March 1st to May 31st of 2026, and we're looking at those departures from normal precipitation, and we can really see in the greens and blues and purples those wetter areas for spring, and those browns and reds, those drier areas for spring. All right, we've covered a lot of ground. There's like 40 some odd tools in this cli-MATE product. We can't go through them all, but you can. And if you have questions, suggestions, comments, new tools you'd like to see, I encourage you to hit this red button at the top that says suggestions. That'll take you to a little survey where you can drop us a line. And if you want to stay up to date on all the new things happening with cli-MATE or at the MRCC, I encourage you to sign up for our quarterly newsletter. It's short because I have to write them, so it's a good way to stay involved. And with that, I will close it up and say thank you, and hopefully have some time here for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. Let me really quick just share my screen as we wrap up here. Okay, hopefully you all can see that. I did put the link to sign up for your newsletter in the chat box if people are interested. So again, we have a few minutes for questions if anybody has them. Thank you again for that great demo of cli-MATE. I know that I love to use the maps and find all the data on there, just a lot of great information. So right now we don't have any questions, so we'll just wait another second and then we can wrap things up. Let's see. Okay, since we don't have any questions coming in, let me just double check one more time. Yeah, we will go ahead and just wrap up. Again, thank you so much to all the presenters from today. Their contact information is on the screen. My contact information is also on the screen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with any of us. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, August 6th at 2 p.m. Central. Registration for this webinar will be sent out by email through the Midwest Dues listserv. So again, if you're not on that, definitely sign up. And another thank you to Aaron, Darrin, and Melissa for your presentations and time. So that concludes today's webinar, and thank you for joining us.